Welcome to Left Africa.
Imagine that your business is processing over $50 billion a year. Like you are managing over 1 billion individual transactions.
Right.
From the outside, you look like this absolute titan, an unstoppable financial force. But internally, you are fighting for basic survival every single day.
Every single day. Yeah.
And that is exactly the reality inside Flutterwave right now. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are tearing apart a really, really sharp investigative report from LeftAfrica.org.
It's a great piece.
It really is. It's dated June 21st, 2026. And our mission today is to look past the glossy public relations announcements and expose the brutal, fragmented reality of building a tech unicorn.
Exactly.
Specifically, we're putting Flutterwave's massive new partnership with the crypto giant Ripple under the microscope.
Yeah, because there is this really profound disconnect between the narrative and the operation.
Yeah.
You have this external illusion of like effortless, continent-wide scale.
Yeah, the PR machine.
Right. And then you have the internal reality of daily, grinding, bureaucratic warfare just to keep the infrastructure from basically collapsing under its own weight.
We really need to break down that warfare because the numbers Flutterwave throws around, like that $50 billion in processing volume, they're staggering.
They are.
But the report argues that the transaction volume isn't even the real story. The real story is the desperate survival tactics hidden underneath all this stablecoin hype.
Yeah.
So let's just start with the spark that set this whole news cycle off. On June 16th, 2026, Ripple takes this undisclosed equity stake in Flutterwave's Series Z funding round.
Right, the big announcement.
Yeah, and the headline feature of the deal is integrating RLUSD, which is Ripple's US dollar pegged stablecoin, into Flutterwave's existing payment rails across, I think, more than 30 African countries.
Yeah, over 30.
Yeah.
And to really grasp why they're pitching this as a landmark integration, we have to look at the actual mechanical problem of moving money across African borders.
It's notoriously awful, right?
It's punishing. It really is. Let's say a medium-sized logistics business in Kenya needs to pay a supplier in Nigeria. Those transaction fees can easily consume 5 to 9% of the total transfer.
Wait, 9%? Just a 9% haircut to move your own money from point A to point B?
Exactly.
I mean, that wipes out a company's profit margin before the goods have even shipped.
It completely wipes it out. And the friction isn't just financial, right? It's temporal.
It takes forever.
Right. Using traditional correspondent banking, that transfer doesn't just go straight from Kenya to Nigeria.
Where does it go?
Well, the Kenyan bank likely has to route the funds through a correspondent bank in London or New York to convert the Kenyan shillings to US dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then route it back down to a Nigerian bank to convert those dollars into Naira.
That's a huge detour.
It is. And each of those hops requires a third party to verify the transaction, take a cut of the fee, and physically hold the money. That whole process can take 3 to 5 business days to actually settle.
I always try to visualize financial plumbing, and that sounds like trying to fly commercial from Nairobi to Lagos, but you're forced to take layovers in London and New York.
Yes.
And having to recheck your baggage at every single stop. It's just wildly inefficient.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. So the promise of integrating RLUSD and the XRP ledger is that you just eliminate those layovers.
Right.
You're no longer bouncing fiat currency between intermediary banks. You convert the local currency to the digital stablecoin, beam it across the decentralized ledger directly to the destination, and convert it back.
Seamless.
Exactly. The settlement time plummets from 3 to 5 days down to 3 to 5 seconds.
3 to 5 seconds. I mean, going from a 5-day multi-hop nightmare to a 3-second direct charter flight, that sounds like the holy grail of fintech.
It does.
You're taking an already massive platform and giving it the ability to move money with almost zero friction. It feels like the kind of technological leap that should send a company's valuation into the stratosphere.
You would think so.
Right. But when I looked at the actual numbers from this Series E round, their valuation only hit $3.2 billion.
Yeah.
That is barely a 6.7% increase from their $3 billion valuation 4 years ago in 2022.
Yep.
So if they just solved one of the biggest bottlenecks in global finance, why aren't investors throwing a massive premium at them?
Because institutional investors are pricing in structural risk, not technological hype.
Ah, Okay.
right? A 6.7% bump over 4 years of, intense global inflation is not a victory. In the venture capital world, that is essentially a flat round. It's a plateau.
It's treading water.
Exactly. The market understands the underlying power dynamic of this partnership. Ripple did not lead this funding round. They took a strategic, likely minority stake just to protect their downside.
So it's less of a resounding endorsement of Flutterwave's future and more of a mutually beneficial marriage of convenience.
I'd say it's a marriage of mutual desperation.
Desperation, really.
Yeah, look at Ripple. They have been locked in a grinding legal battle with the SEC in the United States for years.
Right.
They desperately need to demonstrate massive real-world utility for their ledger in the Global South to prove they're a functional utility, not just a speculative asset.
And Flutterwave has the map.
Exactly. Flutterwave possesses a physical distribution network spanning over 30 countries. Ripple needs Flutterwave's physical footprint much more than Flutterwave needs Ripple's blockchain.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. For Flutterwave, this capital injection and the resulting stablecoin headlines provide a lifeline that's basically disguised as a victory lap.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can build the fastest stablecoin highway in the world, but if the money arrives in Nigeria as a digital token, you can't exactly go to the local market and buy groceries with a string of code.
Right.
You need a physical off-ramp to turn that crypto back into fiat currency.
Which brings us to the actual foundation required to make this Ripple deal functional. You cannot run a localized stablecoin settlement system without a regulated, fully licensed institution to hold the local fiat reserves.
And this leads right into the massive development from April 2026, when Flutterwave finally secured a full Nigerian banking license.
Yes.
This fundamentally alters their DNA, doesn't it?
It does.
They're no longer just a payment processor sitting on top of other banks' infrastructure. They are now a regulated financial institution capable of holding user deposits and lending money directly.
That license is the concrete anchor of their entire operation. Because without it, Flutterwave would have to rely on a third-party Nigerian bank to handle the final conversion from RUSD to Naira.
And that defeats the whole purpose.
Completely. That third-party bank would charge integration fees, they'd demand compliance audits, and they'd add latency back into the system, totally defeating the 3-second ledger transfer. With the license, Flutterwave actually owns the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah.
But we have to acknowledge that securing this foundation was a grueling 5-year war of attrition with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
5 years of regulatory friction. And the report highlights that just to get the technological capability to operate this newly licensed bank, they had to acquire an open banking provider called Mono in January 2026.
Yeah, to understand that acquisition, we need to look at how open banking actually functions.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. Open banking APIs are essentially the digital plumbing that allows different financial applications to talk directly to a consumer's bank account, completely bypassing the clunky traditional card networks like Visa or MasterCard.
So instead of a user typing in a 16-digit credit card number, the API just securely connects Flutterwave's system straight into the user's bank ledger.
Precisely. To act as a modern bank that can instantly clear these new stablecoin transactions, Flutterwave desperately needed that direct API plumbing. But the detail the LeftAfrica report uncovers is that they bought Mono at a severely distressed price.
Really? How distressed?
Significantly below Mono's 2021 peak valuation of roughly $15 million.
Oh, wow. It's as if Flutterwave was building a massive skyscraper, realized halfway through that they didn't know how to install the internal plumbing, and had to buy a struggling plumbing company at a fire sale discount just to finish their own building.
That is exactly the dynamic. They absorbed distressed tech assets because they desperately needed the operational pipes.
Yeah.
It demonstrates incredible operational grit, but it also reveals a highly disjointed journey. I mean, they spent half a decade patching their ship with whatever parts they could find while actively navigating incredibly turbulent regulatory waters.
But pouring all that concrete and buying infrastructure companies in Nigeria requires an immense amount of capital.
Huge amounts.
And the LeftAfrica report reveals that building this fortress at home came at a brutal, quantifiable cost to the rest of their African footprint.
This is where the structural reality of the continent hits really hard. In March 2025, Flutterwave initiated sweeping layoffs.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, they eliminated roughly 50% of their workforce across key regional hubs like Kenya and South Africa.
50%.
And they gutted absolutely vital departments. We're talking compliance, legal, human resources, and sales.
The numbers coming out of Kenya are particularly stark. Their Nairobi office shrank from roughly 20 people down to fewer than 8.
Yeah.
And the report explicitly links this to the fact that the Central Bank of Kenya had been delaying Flutterwave's full payment service provider license since 2023. They had received name approval, but no actual license to process payments.
Right. If you have a team of 20 skilled professionals sitting in an office in Nairobi, essentially waiting 2 years for a regulator to stamp a piece of paper so you can legally operate, you are hemorrhaging cash.
Just burning money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, they faced a completely different problem. That market was simply too mature.
Too much competition.
Yeah. Entrenched local giants like PayFast, backed by deeply integrated traditional banking networks, made it far too expensive for Flutterwave to bleed the marketing capital required just to win a little market share.
I hear that, but I have to push back a little on the framing here.
Sure.
Technology companies lay people off all the time. The entire industry has been on a massive post-boom diet, focused on operational efficiency rather than growth at all costs. Why is the LeftAfrica report framing this specific event as a full-blown retreat rather than just, standard corporate belt-tightening?
It's because of what the company did quietly in the immediate aftermath of those cuts.
What did they do?
They didn't eliminate those compliance and legal roles to streamline the company. They eliminated the geographic locations of those roles.
What?
They turned around and rehired for the exact same functions: compliance, legal, enterprise sales in Nigeria.
Ah, I see. Because the salaries for top-tier legal and tech talent in Lagos are substantially lower than they are in Nairobi or Johannesburg.
This is textbook labor arbitrage. They are retreating to their cheapest operational market to save cash.
Wow.
The reason the investigative report frames this as a retreat is because it shatters the grand narrative that Flutterwave sells to the world.
The Pan-African dream.
Right. They've always pitched themselves as the ultimate Pan-African empire, building this unified financial layer equally across the entire continent.
Yeah.
But these physical operational choices prove they are fundamentally a Nigerian company first. They're treating the rest of the continent as a peripheral cost center, only funding satellite offices when the local regulatory and economic environments are perfectly favorable.
So they pull the borders back, bring the essential functions home where labor is cheaper, and circle the wagons.
Exactly.
But if your entire survival strategy hinges on retreating to your home base and begging your local central bank for a full banking license, your corporate reputation needs to be utterly unassailable.
Right. Regulators are inherently conservative. They do not hand over the keys to the sovereign financial system to companies that appear reckless or unstable.
Which brings us to a massive, lingering problem for Flutterwave. They had an incredibly radioactive reputation.
They did.
Since 2022, they've been dragging the heavy baggage of a very public, very ugly, toxic workplace scandal. We're talking about severe allegations of harassment, discrimination, and a deeply entrenched corporate culture of fear.
And we have to look at how a culture of fear mechanically impacts financial compliance.
Okay, how so?
Well, if your mid-level engineers are terrified of retaliation for speaking up about a broken software feature, they're absolutely not going to speak up when they notice a multi-million-dollar money laundering red flag.
Oh, that is a great point.
Right. Or a glaring compliance failure. Fear actively breaks risk management. Regulators know this. They look at culture as an indicator of systemic risk.
That makes perfect sense. A toxic culture isn't just an HR problem. It is a direct threat to the integrity of the banking license. And this reputation just would not fade. Even 3 years later, in 2025, when Time magazine profiled Flutterwave for their 100 most influential companies list, they explicitly called out the lingering shadow of these allegations.
They couldn't shake it.
No. And there's a quote in that profile from CEO GB Agbula that I found incredibly revealing. He basically said, "I wish it was boring."
That single sentence explains their entire strategic shift.
Really? Just the word boring.
Yes, boring is the ultimate goal when you are trying to become a bank. Boring means predictable, heavily audited, slow, and compliant.
The opposite of a startup.
It is the absolute antithesis of the move fast and break things startup ethos. They needed to aggressively signal to the Central Bank of Nigeria that the wild, chaotic startup days were dead.
And the report outlines exactly how expensive that signal was. In September 2025, they executed a massive high-profile compliance overhaul.
Oh, yeah, huge.
They brought in 3 global heavyweights, most notably hiring Prashant Kalia as their chief risk and compliance officer.
If you look at Kalia's resume, It is a masterclass in global regulatory navigation. He spent years at Circle, Stripe, and Amazon.
Heavy hitters.
These are institutions that have successfully integrated compliance across wildly divergent global jurisdictions.
I mean, you don't hire 3 senior, globally recognized compliance executives in a single quarter, which, by the way, must have cost an absolute fortune in compensation.
Easily.
You don't do that unless you are desperately trying to prove that your foundation is finally stable. It's like trying to get a bank loan while your house has a giant neon party house sign on the roof.
Right.
They had to tear down the neon sign and hire a team of elite bouncers just to prove to the regulators that the house was finally in order.
That's exactly it. They were buying credibility just as much as they were buying operational expertise.
So taking all of this into account, the Ripple integration, the grueling fight for the Nigerian banking license, the labor arbitrage, the cultural overhauls, what does this specific company's struggle reveal about the broader state of global technology?
It perfectly illustrates a concept the LeftAfrica report calls the African unicorn trap.
The African unicorn trap?
Yeah. This trap is the brutal collision between 2 opposing forces. On one side, you have the global venture capital narrative of seamless software disruption. The idea that code scales infinitely and without friction.
Right.
On the other side, you have the harsh physical reality of highly localized, politically fragmented operations.
We look at an app on our phone that sends money instantly, and it creates this illusion that the world is entirely borderless.
Exactly.
But underneath that slick user interface, integrating a stablecoin like RLUSD across Flutterwave's network isn't just updating a few lines of code on a server.
No, it requires 34 distinct, manual, highly political regulatory negotiations across 34 separate sovereign jurisdictions.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You have Nigeria, which oscillates wildly between outright banning cryptocurrency and attempting to tax and regulate it.
Right.
You have Kenya, which will freeze your operational licenses for years while they figure out their own frameworks. Software might be borderless, but fiat currency is inherently tied to physical sovereign borders and the politicians who control them.
That is the core realization here, isn't it? True innovation in global finance isn't just about writing elegant code or launching a decentralized ledger.
No, it's not.
It's about the unglamorous, grueling manual labor of surviving compliance. It's negotiating with dozens of different central bank bureaucrats just to get permission for a digital coin to legally cross an imaginary line on a map.
It completely reframes how we should view these massive tech valuations. The companies that win aren't necessarily the ones with the best technology. They're the ones with the deepest political endurance.
Which perfectly summarizes the incredible tension at the heart of this report. On the global stage, Flutterwave is projecting this $3.2 billion stablecoin promise alongside Ripple, pitching a frictionless future. But down in the engine room, the reality is a company executing brutal labor arbitrage, retreating to its cheapest market, and engaging in years of regulatory hand-to-hand combat just to secure a local license to survive.
Stark contrast.
It is the ultimate story of selling a borderless dream while managing a highly localized nightmare.
The maintenance of the illusion requires an incredible amount of hidden friction.
It really does. And before we close out this deep dive, there is one final detail from the source material that deserves your attention, something that could upend this entire ecosystem.
Oh, the CBDC.
Yes. The report briefly mentions that while private companies are fighting for these licenses, the nation of Ghana is actively exploring its own central bank digital currency, or CBDC.
A fully sovereign digital currency.
Exactly. A currency native to the internet, but fully backed and controlled by the government itself.
Right.
If individual African nations successfully launch their own interoperable digital currencies, what happens to private bridge solutions like Flutterwave and Ripple?
That's the million-dollar question.
Will the very central banks that Flutterwave is spending millions of dollars and years of sweat to comply with today end up building public digital infrastructure that makes Flutterwave's private stablecoin rails entirely obsolete tomorrow?
It's a massive existential threat.
It truly is. Keep an eye on how these governments innovate because the landscape is shifting rapidly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.